So, one of the things I've come to know in my experience leading other people is that helping other people win is like one of the greatest feelings you can ever have as a leader. And I haven't actually met a single leader who also doesn't enjoy winning. But I've noticed something that's so much more powerful, and that is, those leaders who last, who built real legacy, and those who built incredible influence, like really, really genuine, authentic influence, and have authority, like they carry authority, they embody authority. No authority isn't, hammering you on the head, but they just carry this air of authority around them. These leaders are the ones who help others to win first. They're not really about, hey, I've got to win, I've got to win. Or that, I'm the leader here, so I've got to be, the first, etc. But as we move towards International Women's Day this year, I really want to challenge the narrative in terms of, give to gain, and really bring our attention and our heart and our mind and our attitude towards the fact that it's not about what do I get, but it's really more about, who am I lifting? Am I really leading from a generous spirit? And so today I wanted to talk about leadership that is generous, a leadership that puts other people on top to win. And our topic for conversation today is generous leadership. And this episode is not about living in it's not about leading for I've got to give you something and I'm gonna get something. It's not transactional. It's everything about living and leading from a very generous spirit. Not transactional, not, like I said, I'm gonna give so I can gain, but really from that kingdom mindset, kingdom perspective, that kingdom leadership that says that, my job as a leader is to help other people win, right? And so if we look at the definition of generosity, it's the quality of showing kindness and willingness to give more than is necessary or expected. Kingdom generosity is a bit different though. It's not about leverage, it's not about strategy, it's not networking. It's really all about leadership that understands multiplication. And I was reading a book once, my mentor and my certification as a trainer is from John C. Maxwell, and he talks about a story of a leader in 1984, if I remember. His name is Lou Whittaker, and he actually led the first all-American team to the summit of Mount Everest. And the five climbers reached the camp at 27,000 feet. But only three could really attempt the summit. Um, he stayed back. He sent the two strongest, climbers down to retrieve the supplies, knowing that, like, hey, they potentially could lose their chance in being able to reach the summit, whilst maybe the weaker ones would rest and would receive the glory. But then when he was asked, hey, why didn't you do that yourself? He was like, well, my job is to put other people on top. And that was like, wow, that is incredible leadership. And, the point I want to make from that is that kingdom leadership is not transactional. Many leaders can often um, give with maybe hidden expectations. You know what? I'm going to support you now, and then you can support me later, or that, if I promote you now, you can do X, Y, Z, or if, I mention you now, then, we can gain. No, 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 that's not generous. That's just pure and simple exchange and transactional. Kingdom leadership, though, gives because it understands stewardship and understands multiplication. And it's really simply from a place of generosity. Why does it matter now? Well, because transactional leaders create, like, it just creates nothing but shallow relationships, whilst generous leaders actually create real, genuine relationships and friendships that have depth. And, you know, when you're giving something, not from a place of generosity, but because you want to gain something, then it's almost like, that entitlement, if you will, and that almost always will block your ability to multiply. Um, but I do believe that generosity builds better relationships without actually chasing it, if that makes sense. And when you lead from a generous spirit, then in my opinion, and in the bigger scheme of things, it also shows that you're not insecure, because when you're not insecure, you can be generous in your leadership. You can be generous in your attitude. You can be generous in your spirit. You can be generous in everything you do and everything you are. So the challenge I have for you, because every week we have challenges, is I want you to really examine your your recent, acts of giving or recent acts of support. And then ask yourself this question: were they pure or were they positioning? Right. Um, and then in a really practical sense, maybe you want to shout out someone, you want to, tell the world about someone and how incredible they are without necessarily, you know, tagging yourself for everything to come back to you. Of course, you're the one promoting the person, you're the one giving them a shout out. And maybe another thing you can think of in practical sense as you're building that muscle of being generous is introducing two people who can benefit from each other. I have to add though, because introduction usually opens the door a lot faster, make sure that you take time to get to know people so you know the character of people. So that as you're introducing people of character one to another, because I do believe it's so important that we build really good, strong character. Both of my mentors, Dr. Arlene Westerhoff and Dick Westerhoff, they're very much about, character. They're always hammering it to Tina. You gotta build character before anointing. You gotta build character before anything else. And so I've come to believe that character is like your biggest asset ever as a leader. And then I also want you to try in practical terms, celebrate other women, celebrate other people publicly without having to insert your own achievement. Because then it's like, your insecurity showing up. And that's not really being generous either. The second point I want to make is that when you're helping other people, it doesn't diminish who you are. Um, that's the spirit of scarcity where it's like, oh, if somebody rises, then I shrink. No, no, no. That's just small thinking leadership. In kingdom leadership and in a kingdom mindset, when you are helping other people, you're not diminishing. There's no limitation in how much more you can grow, how much more you can be. There's no limitation. There's abundance. There's always abundance. And I think Lou Whittaker understood something very powerful, and that is when the team reached the summit, the mission succeeded. His authority didn't reduce because he stayed or because he chose. It doesn't. Your focus and your purpose and your attitude as a leader is, how can I help other people to win? How can I help other people to be bigger than me? How can I help other people to achieve what they're called to be and who they're meant to be? Right. Insecure leaders sometimes will often compete with their own team, but the truth is when you're a team, everybody wins, right? Secure leaders develop successes. And when you hoard opportunities, it's almost more or less like exposing your own fear. However, when you release opportunity, that's how you display strength. And I believe mentorship is the quickest way to multiplication. And so I want to challenge you, identify one woman that you can positively and actively position this quarter. So March, April, May, or April, May, June, right, in this quarter. Give someone maybe an opportunity that you could have easily taken. Maybe share your framework. Share. I always like when I do maybe a webinar or a class, I just share everything that I possibly can because when somebody goes and applies it in their business and they win, wow, they might come and say thank you. Great. If they don't, it doesn't matter. You help them to make a change. Right. And so it's really, really important that we think about the fact that when we help others, we don't lose anything. Point number three is your role is far bigger than the spotlight. Some of you are called to build platforms and the people, some of you are called to build people themselves. And often the greater call is the second. We're called to build other people. And again, Whittaker stayed behind because he understood the assignment is that my job here is to get other people to the top. And so not every leader really needs to stand on the summit. Not every leader needs to be at the top. Some are called to build a team that gets there. Why it matters? Because truth is, spotlight fades, but your legacy remains. So when you mentor other people who will carry your influence maybe further down, further than your own platform ever could, guess what? You've done your job. When you build others, you multiply your impact across generations and across many industries. And what I love, one of the things I really love about Nations of Women and who we are is that we exist because generosity, the spirit of generosity is what's building who we are as Nations of Women. So your challenge this week is ask yourself, are you obsessed with, being visible or really more focused about impact? And in practical ways, you know, set up one intentional mentoring conversation this week or this month. Invest in someone who perhaps can't repay you back. Maybe pray for the success of somebody that you're developing. That's a big one. And some questions to reflect on is, hey, think about these. Where have I been leading transactional? Where have you been leading, but from the spirit of transaction rather than generosity? And who are you intentionally helping to win right now? If you stepped back, would your team still rise? Are you secure enough to put others on the top? These are some really great questions to reflect on. And in summary, generous leadership multiplies your influence. Helping other people to win strengthens who you are as a leader. And scarcity thinking would really make us shrink as a leader. It doesn't create big spirited leaders, right? And kingdom leadership builds other people, not necessarily a platform. And helping other people win is not weakness. That's the best possible way you can win as at being a great leader. So this week, I wanted to position somebody else. I wanted to celebrate somebody else's win. I wanted to, think about who can you introduce in your circle, investing somebody else without expecting anything in return. And your job is to put somebody simply at the top. So this is Nations of Women podcast where we're really passionate about building and developing, big spirited leaders, leaders of integrity, leaders who can influence their spheres of society. Where our heart is really truly to multiply who you are. So until we come together again next week, stay faithful, be generous, be bold, and be all in. And that's all for this week.